So as we had this great momentum in policy adoption and we're approaching 300 policies, we realized that we need to put some information out about how to implement these policies. And so we are currently working on an implementation assessment project. Our goal is to provide a tool for transportation agencies to begin to implement their newly adopted policies, as well as provide a process for benchmarking where you're at in that implementation process and creating a standard so that we can give you credit. Everybody loves the map that's on our website that shows all the pinpoints about policies adopted across the country. We'd like to see the same thing for policy implementation, but as you can imagine, implementation is, it's done in a lot of different ways. So you are actually part of the process right now to help us figure out this implementation standard so we can start giving you credit for implementing your policies. At this point, we have created a document, which you will see when we break into our small groups, that has a menu of options for all of our different 4 steps to implementing a policy. And it's been vetted at this point by an advisory committee of practitioners as well as at our strategy meeting. And you will have the draft survey is at your table. So I'm going to talk about the preparation and procedures first, and then we're going to break out and do some group work, and then we're going to have a report out period, and then we'll come back and talk about training, the design manual, and performance measures. You do have a longer cream sheet at your table that is for each table, and we need those back because that's how you're going to help us in this process. And so Stephanie went over the four steps to policy implementation, so I'm going to keep moving since we're a little bit crunched for time and move into preparation and procedures. And I want to first talk, before we start talk about structuring implementation. It's really important that we prepare for the implementation process because these 4 steps are a big deal, and everybody's excited after policy implementation or policy adoption, but policy implementation is a lot of work. And so to take this excitement that you've had around policy adoption and move it into a roadmap for implementation and really defining some steps and structure, it will be helpful for your community. It also helps the community see where you're going next, because we all know once the policy is adopted, the community wants to see things on the ground right away, and that's not practical, as we know, in transportation agencies. And so if we have this roadmap and this plan, this allows the community to see our process and move along with us. And so we have interviewed over 15 communities all over the country of different sizes. They have different policy adoption dates. So some of them have had policies for a year, some of them have had policies for 4 or 5 years. So we have been talking to all these different communities of sizes and in different geographies to find out how they're doing this. How are they implementing their Complete Streets policy? And so what we're hearing right now from these communities is that they have designated a committee or a person to guide activities, which then ensures the accountability. They've also worked to create external or internal committees, and these are very diverse committees. External committees can include, they can be even a subcommittee of an existing committee. So lots of communities have transportation commissions or planning commissions, and you can have a subcommittee of those commissions, existing bodies that then focus solely on implementing your Complete Streets policy. When we hear about internal committees, we hear that planning is included, the health department is included, utilities, the fire department, and the safety folks. And so this is very helpful to have a broad and diverse representation on your committees, because Complete Streets really, as we know, lots of different departments deal with streets, and we need to be touching all of those departments. A few other steps you can take when structuring implementation, and these are our recommendations based on this advisory group that we have been working with, is to kind of make a list of everything that needs to change. So we have the 4 steps of implementation. Go through each of those 4 steps and be making a list of what needs to change. It's great if you can put a timeline around that and assign responsibility. That's even better. We see at Caltrans where they created a Complete Streets executive committee and a steering committee, and it was those 2 committees that really worked together to then funnel the implementation down into their departments, into their technical advisory committee. So moving on to process and procedural change, when we talk about this, we are really looking for this cultural shift. We want it to be the new way of doing business. I think we've all heard a lot of examples from Charlotte this week, and I think what's important with Charlotte is it's not an extra process, it's not a new process, it's not something they only do sometimes. It's this completely integrated process. It's just the way their transportation agency works, and that's really what we're going for when we talk about a process and procedure change. What we're hearing from the communities is that the first easy things that they've been able to accomplish is including Complete Streets language in their RFPs. So when they're hiring consultants for projects, they are saying that the consultant must take a Complete Streets approach or evaluate all multimodal options. They are also incorporating Complete Streets into their bike and ped plans, and we had a lot of discussion about the exemptions, and that is something that we're seeing communities do, is create an exemptions process and assigning responsibility, whether it is the city engineer, an administrator, or the city council. We've heard all of those options. Some other ways that you can update your processes and procedures that we like from this advisory committee is to update documents that you use every day, whether those are standard operating procedures or checklists. Stephanie talked about prioritizing projects that achieve your Complete Streets goals, and then really, again, looking at all of your plans to adopt, to make sure that all of your adopted plans are incorporating the Complete Streets policy. And again, an example from Charlotte, they created their 6-step process. And that process accounts for land use and transportation. It also talks about trade-offs, and then all that information helps them make their final decision. And this, again, is just the way they do business. It's not a special process. It's the process. In New Haven, Connecticut, we saw that they very clearly clarified their process for their project steps, as well as the public involvement. And this really helps when the public knows exactly where they intersect within the project process. And it's in this great, it's very easy to read and very easy to understand. We see in the Mid-America Regional Council in Kansas, where their priority checklist for choosing their projects rates multimodalism with more points. And so in their accessibility section, more points are awarded for integrated modes. And in their public health section, more points are awarded if you increase non-motorized travel. And so this is the point where we would like you to work in small groups at your table. And what we want you to answer on those cream sheets is 3 questions. What are the most important steps? What are the easiest activities that you think a transportation agency or your transportation agency has undertaken to implement your Complete Streets policy? And what are the barriers you've experienced in implementation?
Hi. What would you like me to do?
The most important steps for the preparation.
What we got is designating a coordinator or a committee to oversee the transition.
Okay.
Analysis/revision/development of the workflow, organizational charts, flow charts, in part to ensure accountability for all of the steps, and coordination between plans and policies as kind of one layer to the multiple steps.
Okay, great, thank you.
One of the easiest activities we came up with was to have your high-level officer, for us it's our city manager, convene the directors, convene a meeting and say, this is an important thing, I am saying this is important, I am telling all of you people who work for me this is important, and I am, blessing this person as the lead on this. To do it in that kind of way that doesn't really take any more time, but it really quickly conveys the importance of it. And then the other one we came up with was making sure that the language is in all of your RFPs or your RFQs.
We only got one on that, and that was that when a policy lacks specifics. It's just that, just like in the town B resolution, I think it was, it just says adopt a Complete Streets policy.
So we need to make sure our policies are more specific, and we have lots of information on that. So let's move to procedures. So the table that hasn't gone yet, can we talk about the most important steps in procedures?
We
Great. Project checklist. Perfect. Thanks.
One of the most important things would be measuring system-wide multimodal performance so that it informs your decisions and actions. And that would be the most important.
Barriers, we listed director level resistance. You know, this is redundant. It's already in this policy. We don't need it to have something else. And council member education. They want, you know, the day-long workshop understanding, but they want to get it in 3 minutes.
All right. So our barriers include our leadership and having them understand and come on board. Great. Thank you. So we are going to move on and talk about training, design standards, and performance measures, and then we're going to go through the same exercise. So in training, we think it's very important that staff knows, first of all, that a policy was adopted. And, you know, we've heard that this happens. You know, this really needs to be, policy adoption needs to be inclusive, and staff needs to be part of that policy adoption and have kind of their leadership tell them that this is, you know, this is the policy is adopted, and that this is a new way that we're going to do business. A way that you could involve staff in training is to do staff retreats or on-the-job training, as well as, you know, there's lots of offerings for continuing education credits and conferences. What we hear is that staff training is really an informal process, and nobody really keeps track. Everybody says, yes, our engineers have complete streets training, but they can't really tell me exactly who or exactly what. So lots of people talk about how it's on-the-job training, but there's really no formal process to training after Complete Streets policy adoption. What we would like to see is that there's especially a process to educate new staff as new people come in. We really want to see education on the technical and non-technical issues, so educating how your Complete Streets policy affects public health or the environment, and, you know, making sure it's comprehensive, and that it goes across departments and includes the public. It's very important to keep educating the public after policy adoption, because that's when the projects are happening, that's when things are happening on their neighborhood street, and that communication process is very important. Design guidelines is a tool that is used, you know, in transportation agencies, and it really needs to incorporate your Complete Streets policy, whether that's updating or revising. And we have a lot of, Stephanie talked about some of them, a lot of great tools right now to have that has the latest and best practices, and those should be consulted as you're updating your design guidance. What we've heard from the communities is that they have incorporated Complete Streets into their subdivision codes, into their comprehensive plans, and that updating their design standards and design guidance is in process. We have some great examples of design guidance that have been completed as well, as we know, but with this group of communities, lots of people were in process in this specific section. So whether it's creating a new document or revising an existing document, we really want to make sure that it applies to the public and private development, and that we need to touch all the departments that touch streets. And so it might just not be the transportation agency. It is parking policies or station design plans and zoning code, and as we saw, subdivision codes. So it's really making sure that the transportation agency is talking across departments to their colleagues about their policies that affect streets. In Massachusetts, we see that they combined their multimodal goals with context sensitivity. Nashville defines the elements of each street and then clarifies their purpose and goals, as you can see here on their outline, and in their schematic showing how all modes work together. And when we move to performance measures, you know, we've talked a lot about what is measured counts, and that's how decisions are made. And so we really need to make sure that we have multimodal measurements. And it's great for us if we have before and after policy adoption numbers, but the really important part is that we are changing our performance measures to measure all users of the streets, that we're counting accidents, including bike and ped accidents, and that everybody that's on the street is represented in our measurements. What we hear is that this is difficult, as I'm sure you all can agree with. Common measures, the easiest measures seem to be miles of bike lanes and miles of sidewalks, as well as people are starting to measure pre-post for the projects as far as users and as far as motor vehicle speed. And most of those projects, we're still waiting to get the really good post measurements, but it's really great to see people measuring before and measuring after. Other suggestions include to, track the number of complete streets policy projects that have been done, track the number of multimodal projects that have been done, and talk about collaborating on achieving, community-wide goals. Hopefully that there is, some overarching goals in your community that you want to accomplish. We see in Seattle, Washington, that they really track a lot of different features. So they're tracking the number of crosswalks that they've put in, the number of new sidewalks and bike facilities, curb ramps, street trees. They really are getting down and counting everything that's happening on their street. And so now I want to give you guys a chance, again, to go through the training, design standard, and performance measure sections. And we'll do the same exercise, and I'll float around for questions. Stephanie's out there, Barbara's out there, so thanks.
The most important is to cross departments.
Cross departments in your training, cross-departmental training, thanks. Okay, next table up front. Let's talk about design standards. What was the best answer you had under design standards?
Collaboration across departments and agencies.
Okay, we have collaboration. There's a theme, collaboration across departments and agencies. I love it. Okay, going to the back corner with Barbara's table. What about performance measures? Give us a nugget of knowledge about performance measures.
So I lost myself on the sheet.
It's the last page.
Yeah, we kind of didn't quite get there. We just started discussing these, but we went through the other ones comprehensively.
Okay, all right. Do you have something you want to share from the other two? One thing that bubbled up a lot that you had a lot of discussion on?
Sure. So for the updating design guidance, one of the barriers was hiring a consultant to review the design manuals instead of using the existing.
Okay, so it's really important to update that design guidance. In our final table, do you have anything on performance measures for us?
We had a risk reduction as a performance measure,
Oh,
and a percentage of expenditures from the transportation budget as a way to say, are we putting our money where our mouth is, right? Those were our most important things. And one thing I do want to say just about the training thing also, we all agreed that mobile learning on bike and on foot is a really, really key component to getting everybody trained and getting everybody on the same page to understand the needs for.
that was a good discussion at your table, to get people out experiencing the environment as a user would experience the environment. Great. So I have 3 wrap-up slides, and we are, of course, happy to stay afterwards to chat with you more, and we will also take questions. So I just wanted to let you know more about what we're hearing in the community about the implementation process. So communities are citing the community involvement process as one of their biggest successes. A lot of them had to learn this first. They learned it from a negative experience, and they retooled, created a great community involvement process where they're really engaging the community and telling the community about their successes, about next steps, about why the process is working as it is. That is being cited as one of their greatest successes in their communities. Pilot projects are an important tool. Pilot projects let the community see how things work on the ground. They also let the engineers, test things out. Maybe it's a new treatment that's not fully approved yet, but can be done as a pilot project. So these are just really good tools to help the community get used to seeing these things on the ground, learn how to use this infrastructure, as well as help to move us forward and push the envelope on our policy and on our street design. We just heard it several times, but the communities that engage other agencies say it's very worthwhile, and it produces really great results when all the agencies are talking to each other, and that we are coordinating our streets and not coming kind of in after one another and redoing streets or tearing them up for consecutive projects. So that coordination piece is very important. The challenges communities are facing is really messaging complete streets. Some communities are really having a problem explaining what complete streets is, how it's actually going to work, what it means to have a network versus a project or just one street. And so communities are asking for some more information on how to message complete streets and the implementation piece. They're also, and this kind of goes hand in hand, seeing project-based opposition. So everybody is excited when the Complete Streets policy passes, but when that project is going in on your street, you have a whole nother level of engagement with the community that you need, because they need more information, because now it's affecting them personally. We're also hearing explaining multi-jurisdictional issues is a little bit confusing for the public. You know, they know that they have a Complete Streets policy, and they want to know why that street that's operated by the county when you have a city policy isn't following the policy. And so just really trying to clearly communicate these multi-jurisdictional issues, and then let the community know that you are engaging with the county and that they have elected officials at the county as well, and that there can be some advocacy done there. And again, we've talked about the silos, making sure that there's a vision communicated, so everybody gets the vision, but that means everybody also has to start to work together and talk to each other. And we've heard that several times in this session. So some of the lessons learned is that we've heard from communities is that a resolution is more difficult to implement than an actual legislation. And that is because, a resolution doesn't have those teeth. It's not binding. And then communities are excited. The engineers, the transportation agencies want to implement, but they're hitting barriers because their policy didn't have teeth. Another lesson is to be open, engage the community at the beginning, be open about what this process is going to mean, and what are the potential changes that could take place, how they're going to see these changes, and how long it is going to change, how long these changes are going to take to see. Everybody wants to see the on-the-ground outcomes. Those outcomes might take a little bit of time, and that needs to be in a constant communication with the community. It's also, as you have successes, you need to really start talking about your outcomes. Don't just be doing things internally or tracking things internally and not putting that out there. You should be proud of yourselves. You need to get that information out there to the community. They want to know it. We would love to know it as well. And that only helps you as you progress. So as you're communicating outcomes that this project was a success, that makes your next project even easier. It's essential to have high-level leadership. It's essential to get that mayor or city council person on board with you. They will talk about it. They will go out and really be the visionary and the leader and bring everybody else on board. And communities that have had that say that it's really essential, and they don't understand how people get it done without it. The safety message is an important one, and this also helps when we measure before and after a project happens to show that there is increased safety for all users. And as well, talk about the inexpensive ways that we can implement Complete Streets. What we're hearing from communities right now is that their resurfacing projects are how they're implementing their policies right now, because you have to restripe the road after you resurface. That's really not a choice, and so striping narrower lanes or adding a crosswalk or adding a bike lane is really easy implementation. Signal timing is another one. And so we need to really communicate, especially at the beginning, that not all of these projects are going to be high-cost projects, that there is different things that we can do easily and inexpensively.